So how do you feel about the ending?
In the Wikipedia summary, the way they phrase it as von Franz, from his occult research, theorizes that the Nosferatu can only truly be destroyed through the willing sacrifice of a fair maiden, and he and Ellen hatch a plan to trap Orlok and keep Thomas diverted, as she chooses to sacrifice herself to save the city. I don't understand the symbolism of willing sacrifice of the fair maiden and why Orlok is compelled to do that, why he cannot resist the temptation of Ellen, because that's what's happening. He doesn't even realize that morning is approaching until it's too late, and he doesn't because he's in her spell, right? And I don't understand the symbolism of that. I don't understand why a vampire would behave this way, because the vampire is typically the predator, and humans are the prey, and that is why vampires typically have mind control powers and can kind of cloud our minds and hypnotize us and things like that. And here the opposite of is happening. Like there are things like vampires being vulnerable to garlic has something to do with medieval Christian symbolism in which garlic symbolizes purity. And that is kind of lost on a modern audience, but you can look it up. Like there's something we're familiar enough with that we don't question it. But if you see a vampire story for the first time, it can seem kind of random. Why garlic? I think this might be a bit similar, where I don't know where this comes from. And it's also not something that has been done in other vampire stories that I've seen. And as a result, I find it confusing.
Is it a common theme in sort of like vampire stories where they have like this infatuation with a woman or infatuated by sort of like some type of like love interest or a particular person where they can essentially kind of like lose themselves in that?
I've seen stories where they fixate on somebody and really want to win the prize of this one mortal, but not to the point where they lose control and completely are unable to control their actions. That's just not something I've seen in other vampire stories. And I don't know if this is something the German version in 1922 made up, or if this comes from somewhere else. But this is not part of the vampire stories I've seen before. Typically, it's the other way around, where humans are the ones who are at the mercy of the vampire's influence. And this happens kind of in this one too, right? Where Nock is completely taken over by the psychic presence of Orlok, and Ellen is in that position for a while as well. Like on some level, I can kind of see that, okay, maybe it's because there is this link between them. She realizes it's a two-way street, but Orlok doesn't, or he doesn't realize until it's too late. I don't think it's made very explicit. And it seems to me that if you are not using kind of established kind of tropes, then you need to establish them. They kind of establish them in this case simply by von Franz kind of just stating it, saying is in my research I have found that this is the case, and then they do it, and then they win. And it seems a bit like a plot device to me. Like if this was a new story where an author just came up with this, I would say you want to justify that a little bit. Maybe because it's Eggers and because it's like a classic silent film and stuff like that, people are not asking those questions.
One thing I have realized though, when it comes to some vampire movies, I swear they're like some vampires have like a fixation on a specific person's blood. So that's what I think they were trying to do with this in terms of like where Orlok's obsession came from. Of course, like they have a bond, right? Cool. But I think even like in Twilight, even though it's not really a great depiction of what vampire mythology, but in like other movies, I've seen like vampires where there's like a specific person where they have like a strong fixation and an obsession of drinking them. So I think maybe that's where Orlok's kind of obsession came from. So I think the fixation of her blood is what caused his obsession.
So the vibes that I got is that he's just in love with her, that he simply cannot control himself, and that he kind of just loses himself in her spell. I don't think it's about the blood. I think it's about the psychic link, and it's about him having fixated on her. So what's different to other vampire stories is that he loses complete control. She is able to hypnotize him because of that link that they have and because of the love he feels for her, to the point where like this centuries-old vampire cannot simply say, it's almost sunrise, I'm going to come back tomorrow and there's nothing you can do about it. Does he not have that patience after being around for hundreds of years? That was the disconnect for me, that I didn't understand where the compulsion came from, to the point where he was completely helpless.